Rajaram Mohan Roy joined the service in the Revenue Department of the East India Company. He was an assistant to Mr. John Digby, an English officer from 1809 to 1814 at Rangapur. Digby appreciated Rajaram Mohan Roy, his efficiency. Though he held a high post and a handsome salary and had property in his village, he did not seek a life of luxury. Right from the younger age, we can see at the age of 14 onwards, he was intending to become a monk. Only his mother stood in the way. Otherwise, he would have joined. Already that was the religious background he had. Rajaram Mohan Roy was 6 feet tall. He had a well-built body and handsome and bright face. He was a highly cultured man. He had an exceptional personality. Rajaram Mohan Roy began the study of English in his 22nd year. He used to read books. He also used to read English newspapers received by Digby from England. Therefore, he knew much that many Indians knew nothing about. He knew about French Revolution, 1789 to 1795, which had just then ended. He saw that the stock of knowledge was growing rapidly in Europe. He knew what the people and the scholars of Europe felt about the ideals of liberty, equality, and democracy. Digby used to have visitors from several foreign countries. Ram Mohan mixed with them and freely learned how to converse fluently in English. He developed an elegant and forceful English style. The boy was very intelligent right from the beginning. We can see him learning 2-3 languages, Persian, Arabic, Sanskrit without any hesitation. And English became handy for him. Rajaram Mohan Roy loved knowledge. How much knowledge he amassed! With the help of Jain scholars, he studied the book of Jainism. From Muslim scholars, he learned Sufism. He was already well versed in Vedas. He used to arrange meetings of learned men in his house and exchange ideas. This widened his knowledge. So already we can see in him a man not bound or limited by his own religion. He was a staunch believer as a Hindu in his religion. That did not prevent him from knowing more about other religions and the knowledge. He wished to go abroad and learn more, but his own relatives filed a suit in the court. This came in the way of his visit to other countries. Digby, who had gained the confidence of Ram Mohan, returned to England in 1814. Ram Mohan resigned his post and settled in Calcutta. He devoted the rest of his life to the public service. So sometime we see him working in the East India Company or working for East India Company. All this time he had been something burning within him, that is looking at the plight of his own countrymen and how Indians were treated. That really disturbed him. So it ended up in one thing, that is he resigned the job with the East India Company and came and settled in Calcutta. That India should prosper was Ram Mohan's ardent desire. But the people had to be cured of ignorance. They needed education. He dedicated himself to this task. So we can see in this contemporary Indian thinker, Rajaram Mohan Roy, who set the scene, or the first one to come onto the scene to set the ball moving. That is the Renaissance movement. So a man who had that great vision, India is not this, or Indians are not meant for this. They had an ancient culture, a religion, such a lot of diversity and that should live. That was his ideal. A mighty task calls for earnest, mighty preparation, does it not? Rajaram Mohan Roy prepared himself in every way to undertake this big task. He had understood the essence of all the religious books. He had first to move the dirt or superstitions and bad customs which had dimmed the brightness of Indian culture. So a culture which got dimmed due to the superstitious belief, the customs which had to be remedied. Then he had to learn how the educational system had developed in other countries, the ways of life there, and what efforts were made to put an end to poverty. What was good in other countries had to be learned to be followed here. In this way, Rajaram Mohan Roy began the work of reformation. So a man who really thought for India, the revival, the renewal of India. The whole system had come to a standstill. The years of suppression, the oppression by the Britishers, the religious oppression from the top, that's the Brahmins, the domination of the Brahmins, and the caste-laid society. So everything had made the people, especially the majority of them were the poor one or the lower caste persons. So they had absolutely no hope. They thought, it's my fate to be that, or to be born in a caste like that. There is no salvation, no hope. I have to be under, or I have to be a slave like that. And then the course of time, we can see a lot of superstitious practices, abominable things creeping into religion. So the religion became or came to a kind of pure ritualism, devoid of any reason, and thus it had become only just a ritual, or all rituals. But he did not believe that all old customs in India should be given up and that Indians should blindly imitate foreigners. He did not condemn all the religious customs, but he said that they should use the discretion in following them. Many times people do wrong things without knowing what has been said in the scriptures. They can read these holy books if they are available in the language of the people. When other people say, this is what the scriptures say, that is what is the scriptures say, people can find out for themselves what these books say. So Rajaram Mohan Roy is setting out on a new venture of translating the Holy Scripture into own vernacular. The holy books of the Hindus were in Sanskrit. Rajaram Mohan Roy translated them into Bengali. In his preface, he said, we should understand correctly what is said in our religious books and what is relevant to our times. A man who thought at that time and who could use his reason, knowing that what is the real cause of the poverty, and that was the ignorance. So to remove the ignorance, he wanted to do really something to alleviate the suffering. Rajaram Mohan Roy was a firm believer in truth. He would admit his faults. He used to quote the words of Vasishtha, words of wisdom should be accepted even if they come from a child. But even if Lord Brahma utters unwise words, they should be ignored as a blade of straw. So that was a staunch believer in truth. Atmiya Sabha. So something which he founded in order to remedy a lot of evils which was existing in the religion. For example, the marriage of girls at 6 years old, burning of the wife with her dead husbands, whether she is willing or not, meaningless observance of festivals and worship of worship for show, the worship of several gods and ranking gods as high and low. These were already had crept into this religion as customs, traditions, rituals and practices. Rajaram Mohan Roy was sick of these practices. He had a high regard for Hinduism, but he felt that the Hindus had yet to understand their religion correctly. There should be equality between men and women, perhaps, or people should give up superstitious beliefs. Many of Rajaram Mohan Roy's friends accepted his line of thinking. An association of such close friends were formed and called Atmiya Sabha, the Society of Friends. Religious discussions took place there. The members had to give up their idol worship. They had to spread the society's views on religion among the people. Many scholars opposed Ram Mohan Roy wrote articles in reply. The people read them and understood what was said in the sacred books. So his initiative in translating the Sanskrit scripture into Bengali to help the people to read and understand. When other people would say that so stays in the scripture, people can go and refer it and find out whether that reference is correct or not. So that was the advantage of having the vernacular language. When it was Sanskrit, then many people did not have access to that. Many people did not know Sanskrit. So it remained only the hand of a few. And that was also a religious politics of making only that in Sanskrit, so that the Brahmins who were well versed in that would remain always at the top. So Rajaram Mohan Roy saw that if a real breakthrough is to be made, then vernacular is a must. His regard for Hinduism. Some Christian priests were overjoyed at Rajaram Mohan Roy's interest and in his enthusiasm for Christian doctrines. They suggested that he should become a Christian. These priests did not understand the mind of Rajaram Mohan Roy, who was a staunch believer in Hinduism. He had great respect for Vedas, Upanishads, which he had studied deeply. So he was a man who was well versed in his own religion or thoroughly studied the Vedas and scriptures. Some men spoke lightly of the Vedas and Upanishads. Rajaram Mohan Roy gave them a very clear answer. There is only one God in the universe. He has no form and qualities which men can describe. He is full of joy. Every living being has an element of God. These noble ideas sparkle in the Upanishads. Moreover, these books encourage people to think for themselves. They strike out new paths. They did not chain men's intelligence. Just as he condemned the bad customs of the Hindus, he condemned the superstitions of the followers of other religions. So for Rajaram Mohan Roy, religion, he had an access to so many of them, and he studied. Wherever he went, he studied Buddhism, he studied Christianity, Islam, Jainism. So whatever religion that was the major one existing there, he had gone through the principles of those religion, or what was the main content of the religion, and he knew the thought. And reading through many religions or knowing the principles of those religions, he knew that all had one unifying factor, one God, and that God is formless and we can worship Him. Or there is a chance for every religion to come together. Now we come to the aspect of what is the importance of education, why Rajaram Mohan Roy was very much for that. If we are to be happy, we must have good crops. Indian occupation or Indians' occupation was mainly in the agricultural field, or rearing the sheep or the cattle, livestock. Those were the aspects. So, if there were to be income from that agricultural sector, or rearing the sheep or the livestock and all that, there should be good know-how of how to bring about that. For this purpose, we must learn how to use good manure and the machinery. We must build dams and dig canals. We must have good roads, bridges, hospitals and factories to manufacture medicines. Thus, the list, the musts is very long. So Rajaram Mohan Roy was getting into that, how to bring about this education. To fulfill our needs, we need education, don't we? We need persons well versed in the arts and sciences. We should learn how knowledge is expanding in foreign countries. So he had been in touch with what was happening in and around the other world, the Western world, how the know-how was increasing or developing and all that. And still we are with a primitive system here in India. So he wanted to upgrade or develop that, the present structure. To fulfill our needs, then he knew that education is a must. Today, if our country is to prosper, it is not enough if it merely recalls its ancient history and culture. Without forgetting them, the country should develop the knowledge and strength suited to the world today. So that is to move according to the time, or do something that is what is already being developed in other countries. We should be able to have it. Of course, there were schools in Rajaram Mohan Roy's time also, but they were to teach Arabic and Persian needed for the work of the government. There are people who use languages like Bengali, Marathi, Kannada, Telugu, aren't they? These languages also should grow. There was no scope for this. The methods of teaching were also old-fashioned. Much emphasis was laid upon memorization. If children did not memorize, they were punished cruelly. The subjects taught in the schools were very few: mathematics, history, geography. Physics and botany were not at all taught. So all what the school system at that time was catering only to the needs of making the persons to get some kind of job in the office, that is catering to the need of the government. Some people were running English schools. Even there, the system of education was not satisfactory. English words were taught to the children. Those who had memorized them felt proud that they had learned much. Rajaram Mohan Roy came to Calcutta in 1815. He formed an association of English and Hindu scholars. He started a college and also arranged for teaching of modern subjects like science, political science, mathematics, and English. One of the members of the association was a rich and educated man called Radhakanto Dev. He had some followers from the very beginning. He did not like Rajaram Mohan Roy being a member. And he said if Rajaram Mohan Roy were a member, he did not like Rajaram Mohan Roy. He obstinately said that he would not help the association if Rajaram Mohan Roy were a member. To Rajaram Mohan Roy, the prosperity of the association was more important than his status. So he did not become a member of the association, though he himself started it. During 1816 to 17, Rajaram Mohan Roy started an English college with his own money. Today it is difficult to believe that he spent so much money for the spread of education. He understood the condition of our country. He saw that the students should learn the English language and scientific subjects. But in his college, besides Sanskrit also were taught. So he wanted in his college not only the normal languages which were taught in other schools, but besides the Sanskrit and other languages, he also taught them the science subjects too. Rajaram Mohan Roy criticized the government's policy of opening only Sanskrit schools. Because of this, Indians would have no contact with Western civilization. They would be lagging behind without studying modern subjects like mathematics, geography, and Latin were held in high esteem in Europe. But are the students in England learning only Latin, Greek, and the Bible? If science and mathematics are necessary for us, he argued that the government should examine this point. Government accepted his idea of Rajaram Mohan Roy and implemented it after his death. So we can see a visionary already working. So he had a vision for India, how it should develop. That is an overall development, education system, the agricultural sector, in the religion. So his view, an integral view, was very outstanding. What was his attitude towards the poor? When Rajaram Mohan Roy was in Calcutta, he used to go for walks all alone at night. He wished to find out for himself the difficulties of the poor. Once, as he was walking through the slum, people were returning after work. The slum situation, the mosquitoes swarmed. People were sweating profusely. There was stinging smell from the dirt all around. Dirty water was flowing nearby. The laborers were returning home after their daily work. A man was following them. Brothers, he said. The laborers turned back in wonder. How many people live here? He continued. The wonder of the laborers increased. Who was this man? Why had he come here? How much do you work in the days? How many families are here? So the question followed question. The laborers said, why does he want to know all these things? So they took him for an agent of the government, or to find out or something going to happen to this slum. He may be mad. He may be an ideal fool. They said to Ram Mohan, we have nothing else to do with you. Let us go home. Rajaram Mohan Roy bore their mockery and contempt. He followed them. He found out much about their way of life. So a man who really wanted to really get into the shoes of the poor, how they live, what a difficulty they have. So he was not sitting in a glass house and then idealizing. Rather, he went to the spot to learn about them. What was his contribution to the literature? Rajaram Mohan Roy was the first to give importance to the development of mother tongue. His Gaudiya Vyakarana in Bengali is the best of his prose works. His Bengali was terse, simple and elegant. By translating the scriptures of the Hindus into Bengali, he gave Bengali a new dignity. Rabindranath Tagore and others followed in his footsteps. Ram Mohan wrote lyrics also. So the literary contribution, we will also later see that the newspaper works or the newspaper edition which he has made, that also is a contribution to the literary work. Now there is something which as a reformer he is working, that is to reform the religion. Rajaram Mohan Roy's brother Jagamohan died. His wife Alakamanjari had to observe Sahagama, that was to be burned alive with the dead body of the husband. All arrangements were made for the cremation. All the relatives gathered. Alakamanjari put on laced sari, and there was kumkum on her forehead. A mark of kumkum or vermilion on the forehead is considered sacred by Hindu wife. It is an indication that her husband is alive. Her hair was disheveled. Fear was written upon her face. The corpse was brought to the cremation ground. Rajaram Mohan Roy begged his sister-in-law not to observe sati. Relatives objected to Rajaram Mohan Roy's words. They bound her to the corpse and placed her on the funeral pyre with the corpse. The pyre was set on fire. Alakamanjari screamed and cried in fear, but she was not set free. Poor woman. She was burned to ashes along with her husband. All the relatives praised her, shouting, Mahasati, Mahasati, and went back. This heart-rending sight of his sister-in-law Sati made a deep impression on Rajaram Mohan Roy's mind. Then and there he took a vow to put an end to this dreadful custom. Some people believed that the scriptures said that the wife should die along with her husband. Rajaram Mohan Roy referred to all the sacred books, but nowhere was it laid down that the wife should perform sati. This custom had come into practice in some age. Some people knew it was wrong, did not have the courage to condemn it. The brave Ram Mohan took up this difficult task. Imagine a time when religion was all in all and the Brahmins at the top. No change in the customs, traditions was that easy. And here is a man who is a liberal thinker trying to change or do away with a tradition or a custom of Sahagama or the Sati system. But his task was not easy. Lakhs of people had faith in Sati system. Many people opposed Rajaram Mohan Roy and abused him. Some even tried to murder him. But Rajaram Mohan Roy did not flinch. Even the people of the West who saw all this and wondered, when even the government was afraid to interfere in this matter, Rajaram Mohan Roy risked his life and fought against this evil practice. In the end, he won. He won and the government made sati a crime. So see the conviction of a man who against all the odds stood for what is truth. Along with fight for abolition of sati, Rajaram Mohan Roy started a revolution for women's education and women's right to property. He showed that women enjoyed equal freedom with man according to Hinduism. So many aspects are coming into. That's why Rajaram Mohan Roy occupies a special place in the contemporary Indian thinkers, a man who set the movement of the Renaissance, the revival. He was a man of love of independence. Rajaram Mohan Roy was an exceptional patriot and a lover of freedom. I do not think I shall be fortunate enough to see freedom reign supreme all over the world. So he used to lament. Like Tilak, Rajaram Mohan Roy believed that liberty was every man's birthright. Rajaram Mohan Roy was intensely patriotic, but he was generous and broad-minded. In 1823, the Spanish colonies in South America became independent. He invited his friends to a party to celebrate the joyous event. A friend of his asked him, "Why are you so elated if people in South America become independent?" Rajaram Mohan Roy said, "What? They may be in South America, but are they not my brothers? Their language and religion may be different. Should we not sympathize with them in their troubles. So that was the man who had a broader vision, not just confined to his own limited boundaries of the one religion. We have heard of League of Nations, but here is a man who had already foretold the need of such a unit. The First World War was fought from 1914 to 1918. The object of starting League of Nations in 1920 was to see that another such world war did not break out. Any dispute was to be settled by peaceful methods. As this did not function effectively, the United Nations organization was set up in 1945. 100 years before this, the League of Nations was started. Rajaram Mohan Roy had said that such an organization was necessary. If there is difference of opinion between two persons, they do not fight. They go to a court and accept its decision. If there is difference of opinion between two countries, their dispute must be settled without a fight. An organization is necessary to see that all nations cooperate with the help of each other. So that was already a wonderful vision of Rajaram Mohan Roy, the League of Nations, which has now come into effect. That is the United Nations Organization, or UNO as we have it now, which came in 1945. Already 100 years before, Rajaram Mohan Roy found the need of a League of Nations to come so that another war did not occur. So we should settle it before the war erupts. Now we see his role or his contribution as an editor. He knew that if something has to reach to the people, it has to be in their own language. As soon as we get up in the morning, we eagerly wait for the newspaper. No sooner is the paper delivered than one wants to read that. Times were when the number of newspapers was very small, and even those few were in English. There was not a single newspaper in any Indian language. It was Rajaram Mohan Roy who first published a newspaper in Indian language. Newspapers are absolutely necessary to reform people. It is possible to make thousands of people understand many things in their own language. Rajaram Mohan Roy made the newspaper the means of bringing home his views to many people. Atmiya Sabha used to publish weekly called Vangal Gazette. Beside, Rajaram Mohan Roy was himself bringing out a newspaper in Persian called Miratul Akbar, the mirror of news, and the Bengal weekly called Sambad Kaumadi, a moon of intelligence. So we can see the intelligence of this person, Rajaram Mohan Roy, spreading into different or many more areas, a united vision to bring about a change in the society. In those days, items of news and articles had to be approved by the government before being published. So there was no freedom of the press. As we are also feeling today, that the freedom of the press is much curtailed. That time, the British ruling, and it had to be approved by them, so that it was a control showing that nothing unwanted is published by any of the newspaper. Rajaram Mohan Roy protested against this control. He argued that newspapers should be free and that the truth should not be suppressed simply because the government did not like it. Newspapers should have the right to uphold the truth. It needed much courage to speak out like this 150 years ago, when India was under the British rule. The press secured freedom by constant efforts of Rajaram Mohan Roy. In his articles in the papers, Rajaram Mohan Roy explained his view and replied to his opponents. He made his words carefully. He made his comments with tolerance and without wounding. anybody's feelings. He thus set a good example to later editors of newspapers. So a man who really fought for freedom, freedom of the press, freedom of expression. What was his idea of justice and equality? In those days, courts conducted trials by a jury. Some persons were invited to attend the proceedings of the court. At the end, these persons gave the judges their opinions regarding the case. These men were called jury. Indians were invited only to the lower courts, but Englishmen were invited to higher courts. Ram Mohan Roy wrote to the government against this practice. He argued that it was insult to Indians. Finally, the government ended this discrimination. We now hear the slogan, "Land to tiller, don't we?" So you can imagine so many years back, as the colonizers and the time of the kings and the queens, the petty princes, zamindar system or the land or landlords was very much prevalent. Later on, slowly the changes has come, that land to the tiller, that was more of the Marxian influence. In those days, the landlords had much freedom and authority. Some used to exploit the farmers. There was no limit to their luxury, pomp, and arrogance. The farmers had to give almost all their produce to them in the shape of rent. The poor farmers shed tears of blood. Rajaram Mohan Roy, who had seen all this exploitation, had said even long ago that the land should belong to the tiller. So see the various aspects he is making, or the influence or the changes he is bringing into. Brahma Samaj. That was another idea of Rajaram Mohan Roy. Rajaram Mohan Roy and his followers used to attend prayers in the church of a Christian sect. Chandrasekhar Dev, a disciple of Ram Mohan, and others wondered why they should not have a prayer hall of their own. Rajaram Mohan Roy approved this idea. They hired a building belonging to a man called Ram Kamal Basu and opened a prayer hall called Brahma Samaj. The members used to meet every Saturday. Vedic hymns and hymns from the Upanishads were chanted by scholars. Religious discussions were held. Ram Mohan recited the religious poems composed by him. Christian and Muslim boys sang songs in English and Persian. Many Hindus and foreigners used to attend these meetings. So it was a premonition, it's like a first starting kind of a coming together of the different religions. There is only one God, none equals him. He has no end. He is present in all living beings. This was the faith of Brahmas or the Samaj. This was the message of Ram Mohan. The Brahma Samaj did not recognize the difference of caste, creed, race, or nationality. It emphasized the idea of universal brotherhood. Later on we will see also Brahmo Samaj is there, another one. So like this, a starting of an idea of bringing the various religions together. Now we have seen right from the beginning that he had an idea, or he wanted to go abroad and learn something. All the time it was not possible for him because someone or the other came. Sometimes his own people put a petition against him, and therefore no passport, no permission for him. Now, after so many years, he had a chance to go to England. And what was the idea that time about crossing the seas? It was wrong to cross the ocean to go to another country. Such a view appears laughable today, but 150 years ago, it was believed that it was wrong and irreligious for a Hindu to cross seas. Rajaram Mohan Roy was one of the first Indians who rejected this idea and went to England. The allowances granted by the British to the Mughal king of Delhi, Akbar II, was very small. He had to submit a representation to the king of England to increase it. The Mughal king decided to send Rajaram Mohan Roy to England at his expense. Before he left for England, the king gave him the title Raja. The second reason for Rajaram Mohan Roy's visit to England was to plead to the abolition of sati before the parliament. So we have seen him that his desire to make it as a rule or a prohibitory rule, that was his idea. Many people objected to Rajaram Mohan Roy's visit to England. Some British officers also opposed his going to England, but his fame had already reached England. When Rajaram Mohan Roy landed in Liverpool, the leading citizens were there to welcome him. The famous historian William Rathbone, who was laid up with paralysis, sent his son. He fulfilled his last desire by inviting him to his house and by talking to him. Several associations honored him. He visited France also. Everywhere, scholars appreciated his learning. Though the allowances of the king was not finally settled, it was decided that he could be given 3 lakhs rupees annually. Rajaram Mohan Roy's efforts for the abolition of Sahagama were also successful. On the day when the bill was passed by the parliament, the joy of Rajaram Mohan Roy knew no bounds. Rajaram Mohan Roy was very rich. He was a great man who spent his money for the other people and for his country. In Calcutta, even foreigners borrowed money from him in times of need. Such a rich man was reduced in England to total dependence upon others, even for food. His health broke down. The main reason for his financial difficulties was that the firm in which he had invested his capital became insolvent. Out of spite, some people filed a suit against Rajaram Mohan Roy and his son, accusing them of misusing money. Rajaram Mohan Roy had to spend money like water to prove that he was not guilty. Though he got justice, he lost his entire honor and status in England. Even the financial help from his son stopped. Moreover, 1 or 2 persons in England cheated him. He became worried, he fell ill and became bedridden. Some people who had respect for him looked after him like relatives. Reputed doctors treated him, but health did not improve. Rajaram Mohan Roy passed away on 27th of September 1833. A friend of Rajaram Mohan Roy visited England in 1843. He removed the coffin of Rajaram Mohan Roy from Stapleton Grove to Arnos Vale and the cemetery on the outskirts of Bristol and buried it there. A memorial in Indian style was raised over his tomb. It is quite a long time since Rajaram Mohan Roy died, but his memory is still green in the minds of Indians. He was an intellectual who tried to lead India to modernity. He taught the Hindus to give up meaningless beliefs and customs. He was the lamp that led Hindus to essence of Hinduism. His memory itself guides us to a noble life.